That evening inside the glittering Beacon Regency Ballroom in Boston, all eyes were fixed on the stage as Gregory Bennett, founder and CEO of Bennett Industries, stepped up to deliver his retirement speech after 40 years at the helm. Amid applause from nearly 200 guests, Evelyn Bennett sat quietly at table 22, tucked along the far wall just beyond the spotlight's reach. As the youngest and only daughter of Gregory Bennett, Evelyn was no stranger to being sidelined during her family's big moments. Despite her success as the youngest partner at Harper & Langley, one of the East Coast's top architectural firms, her father still saw her career as a creative detour, nothing resembling real business. Gregory spoke with his usual commanding presence, thanking employees, investors, and longtime colleagues. Then, just as Evelyn had feared, he turned to his family. "I owe everything to my two sons, Drew and Brian," he announced proudly, eyes locking on the front row where her brothers sat flanked by their wives. "My daughter, well, she never quite had what it takes for business." The audience chuckled lightly, awkwardly. Behind her calm smile, something cracked inside Evelyn. All those years of effort, not for praise, but for recognition, were once again dismissed. In front of hundreds, her father reaffirmed the message he'd been sending in subtler ways for decades: she didn't belong. Her earliest memory of this kind of dismissal dated back to when she was 8. At a Sunday family dinner, her father discussed quarterly sales with her brothers. Curious, Evelyn had asked, "What's inventory turnover?" a term she'd researched after overhearing one of his calls. Gregory didn't scold her. He simply smirked and said, "Why don't you help your mother clear the table, sweetheart? This is business talk." She didn't fully understand the words, but the exclusion stung. That moment set a pattern. Evelyn was the sweet artistic one, praised for her manners and creativity, yet gently but firmly kept outside the circle where real decisions were made. Her efforts to engage in serious matters were met with thin smiles and quiet redirection. Gregory Bennett embodied the classic American self-made man, bootstrapping his way from a modest upbringing to founding an industrial empire. To him, legacy meant concrete steel, profit margins, and power. Evelyn understood that. But what he failed to understand or refused to see was that she too was building something, not factories, but structures filled with meaning, light, and soul. That night, Evelyn didn't speak. She only tightened her grip on the tote bag beneath her chair, the one that held the silver-wrapped gift she'd spent weeks preparing. It wasn't a watch or a plaque. It was truth packaged neatly inside a box. And when the moment came, she'd give it to him not out of spite, but because Gregory Bennett needed to see what he had spent a lifetime refusing to his daughter wasn't a failure. She simply chose a different blueprint. And sometimes the ones most underestimated are the ones who end up redesigning everything. When Evelyn was young, the Bennett household felt like two separate worlds, one governed by her father, strict, calculated, efficient. The other gently shaped by her mother, warm, imaginative, and full of quiet color. Diane Bennett, Evelyn's mother, had once been a literature professor at Amherst College, a woman who believed in the power of stories and the value of imagination. From the moment Evelyn picked up a crayon, Diane knew her daughter saw the world differently. While Gregory and the boys obsessed over spreadsheets, profit margins, and market trends, Evelyn quietly sketched houses, painted sunrises with crayons, and built miniature cities out of cereal boxes, rubber bands, and glue. "Your father builds things that function," Diane used to whisper as they sat together at the kitchen table surrounded by colored pencils and paper. "But you build things that make people feel." That phrase, spoken when Evelyn was just 9, became her compass through adolescence. In a family where strength was measured by income and strategy, Diane was the only one who made space for softness, for creativity, for Evelyn to be different. She never told her daughter to be like anyone else, only to be herself and to be that person fully. Most afternoons after work, Diane would sit patiently while Evelyn designed future houses, cities that breathe, or schools in the sky. Not once did she laugh at the messy scribbles. Instead, she asked real questions. Why did you face the windows west? How would this building conserve energy? As if her daughter were already a professional architect. That respect planted the deepest seed self-belief. But the comfort didn't last. When Evelyn was 16, Diane died after a 2-year battle with breast cancer. Her death left a hole no one could fill. At the funeral, amid murmured condolences, Evelyn overheard her father quietly telling his brother, "At least the boys will carry on the company. That's what really matters." The words weren't meant for her, but they landed with brutal clarity. She didn't react. She just bowed her head. But inside, the loss doubled. Diane was gone, and with her the only person who had ever truly seen Evelyn for who she was. After the funeral, the house grew silent in all the wrong ways. Gone were the soft poems Diane used to read while cooking the scent of her cinnamon tea, the way she laughed at Evelyn's wildest designs. What remained was Gregory's meeting calendar, stiff family dinners, and her brother's casual questions. Still drawing those buildings, Evelyn turned inward. But instead of giving up, she turned her grief into fuel. She drew more. She read endlessly. She threw herself into design competitions and studies of sustainable architecture. Each small award was a quiet message to her mother. "I'm still going the way you believed I could." Years later, Evelyn opened the safety deposit box her mother had kept in her name. Inside, a handwritten envelope read, "For Evelyn, when you need reminding of your worth." Inside were childhood model photos, clippings from old school design awards, and a letter, "You don't need anyone to define you. You are enough. You have always been enough." That letter remained in the silver box Evelyn would one day hand to the father who had never truly seen her. Because if Gregory Bennett ever looked at Evelyn the way Diane once did, perhaps there was still hope, not to go back, but to build something new. After her mother's passing, Evelyn learned to rely solely on herself. No one asked about her latest ideas anymore. No one listened when she excitedly talked about sustainable building materials or future-ready cities. But the silence didn't stop her, it sharpened her. She moved forward like an underground current, quiet, steady, and unstoppable. While her brothers Drew and Brian pursued business degrees at colleges financed by their father, Evelyn earned a full scholarship to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's School of Architecture, one of the most prestigious programs in the country. She had been her high school valedictorian, acing both calculus and studio art. A rare combination. When she brought home her MIT acceptance letter, Gregory simply said, "Architecture." That's just legalized art. No Bennett has ever been an artist. Evelyn stood there holding the letter, her heart thudding. It wasn't direct rejection, it was worse, erasure. No praise, no pride. Just a subtle dismissal that cut deeper than open disapproval. Throughout her years at MIT, Gregory never called, never visited. But Evelyn thrived. She won multiple student design competitions, including a national award for sustainable housing. In her final year, she was chosen to deliver the commencement address for the School of Architecture, a rare honor. Gregory arrived 20 minutes late and left immediately after the ceremony, citing an important investor lunch with Drew. Evelyn would later learn that the meeting was just lunch, with an old contact Bennett Industries had worked with for years. In the one graduation photo he appeared in, Gregory was checking his watch like the entire event was an inconvenience. That was the last time Evelyn allowed herself to hope for his approval. Instead of taking a job at Bennett Industries like her brothers, Evelyn declined an offer from their real estate division and applied to Harper & Langley, a prestigious architecture firm. She started at the bottom as an intern. When her father heard, he said, "You'll come back in a year looking for a real job." Evelyn smiled but didn't respond. She understood the best kind of success was the quiet kind. 8 years later, she became the youngest partner in the firm's 60-year history. Her design for Seabrook Commons, a sustainable mixed-use development integrating renewable energy, won the Hammond Award for Innovative Design, the architectural world's version of an Oscar. When the feature about her ran in Architectural Digest, Gregory remarked, "Nice. But it's not the same as running a real company with hundreds of employees." His words were always sharp, not cruel, but calculated to diminish. Evelyn had grown accustomed to the pattern-faint praise that functioned as dismissal. Lucky break. Interesting. Not bad. As if every success was a fluke, not the result of tireless work. The more Evelyn achieved, the more distant her father became. They saw each other only during major holidays. Conversations never went beyond surface-level questions. Still drawing those things. "What's that center you built?" "Seaside something." She stopped expecting him to understand or care. But that didn't mean it stopped hurting. Somewhere deep down there remained one unanswered question. What would it take for her father to finally see her for who she truly was? Evelyn had never directly confronted her father. No arguments, no shouting matches. She knew that in Gregory Bennett's world, his word was the final say. But what he didn't know was that for nearly 2 decades, Evelyn had been quietly building something he could not dismiss, truth not spoken but preserved in action. Every time he dismissed her, she didn't push back. She simply kept the proof. Every published design, every award, every professional milestone, Evelyn saved them all. Over time, they became not just a record of her career, but a quiet archive, a case file, maybe for herself, maybe for the day her father might be ready to truly see her. The idea of a gift came unexpectedly during a routine visit to renew access to her late mother's safety deposit box. Inside, among old documents and modest jewelry, she found a cream-colored envelope. On the front, in her mother's familiar cursive, it read, "For Evelyn, when you need to remember your worth." Her hand trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside were fragments of her childhood photographs, of tiny paper models she had built school design award certificates, and a letter from Diane. "My daughter, if the world ever makes you doubt your value, remember this: you are enough. You don't need anyone's permission to be worthy. But if someone ever questions you, show them not through arguments, but through what you've built." Evelyn held the letter for a long time. That night, a thought began to take shape, not out of revenge, but of reckoning. Maybe Gregory would never say the words. Maybe he couldn't. But if he couldn't speak it, he could see it. Over the next few weeks, she gathered everything: her MIT diploma, her architecture license, her LEED certification, copies of her major awards, magazine profiles, financial summaries showing she out-earned both brothers combined, the letter from her mother. She compiled a short video montage titled "What It Takes," documenting her journey from childhood sketches to international projects. It was simple, elegant, and undeniable. Then she found a silver box, sleek and understated, and tied it with a navy ribbon the color of Bennett Industries' logo. On top, she placed a small card. The message read, "From the daughter you once called your biggest failure." It wasn't a slap, it was a statement. No confrontation, no speeches, just the truth laid bare. Evelyn chose to let evidence speak for her. That box would be her final gift to Gregory Bennett, presented, if not received, at his upcoming retirement gala. And if he refused to open it, so be it. Her goal wasn't humiliation. It was clarity. A last chance for him to see her not as a disappointment, not as a deviation, but as the woman she'd become. That evening, the Beacon Regency Hotel in Boston sparkled like a royal ballroom. Inside the grand hall, crystal chandeliers cast shimmering light over round tables, dressed in white linen, each adorned with blue hydrangeas, and white orchids, the signature colors of Bennett Industries. Along the walls, banners reading 40 Years of Building America's Future hung beside the company's crest. Evelyn arrived precisely on time. She wore a navy blue tailored suit with architectural lines at the lapels and cuffs, an intentional blend of professionalism and artistry. In her hand, she carried a leather tote that held the silver-wrapped box. The note on top read, "From the daughter you once called your biggest failure." As she stepped past the branded photo backdrop, she felt the familiar stares, surprised, uncertain, veiled with polite curiosity. "Oh, you're still doing that architecture thing?" someone asked. "Heard your name in some magazine," another added with a half smile. Across the room, Drew waved from the head table where Brian and their wives sat beside Gregory Bennett. Evelyn nodded but didn't move toward them. Instead, she followed her seating card, table 19, tucked near the side exit, surrounded by mid-level staff and distant cousins. The distance felt symbolic. Dinner came and went. Evelyn barely touched her food, her stomach knotted. After dessert, the lights dimmed and the projection screen lowered. The tribute video played. It began with Gregory's early days, groundbreaking ceremonies, shaking hands with governors, standing proudly between Drew and Brian in front of a new plant. Evelyn appeared once in a faded family photo from when she was 10. No mention of MIT, no mention of her firm, no Seabrook Commons, no Hammond Award. Then Drew and Brian gave speeches. "All we know about business," Drew said, "we learned from watching Dad. His legacy lives on in the values he passed to us," Brian added. Finally, Gregory stepped up to thunderous applause. At 65, he still commanded the room's shoulders square, presence unwavering. He straightened his tie, a gesture Evelyn had seen at countless family events. "After 40 years, people ask what I'm most proud of," he began. "The answer is simple, my sons Drew and Brian. They've proven themselves ready to carry this company forward." Then he paused. His eyes scanned the crowd, landing on Evelyn. "As for my daughter Evelyn, I used to worry about her, but I've come to accept that not everyone is cut out for real business." Nervous laughter trickled through the room. Eyes darted. Drew stared at his plate. Brian looked down. Evelyn felt the air drain from her lungs. Her hand tightened into a fist beneath the table nails, digging crescents into her palm. But she didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She stood. Calmly, deliberately, she reached for the silver box, smoothed her jacket, and began walking toward the stage. The click of her heels echoed through the ballroom, silencing every whisper. Gregory froze. His expression shifted from pride to confusion to tension. Drew rose halfway but paused when Brian placed a steadying hand on his arm. Evelyn ascended the stairs and faced her father. She didn't grab the microphone. She didn't raise her voice. She simply held out the box. "Congratulations on your retirement," she said. "I brought you something. From the daughter you once called your biggest failure." Then she turned and walked off the stage, head high, posture steady. And in that moment, no one in the room dared to breathe. As the grand ballroom doors closed behind Evelyn, the silence inside deepened. No one moved. The microphone picked up the sound of Gregory Bennett's uneven breathing, amplifying it across the hall, like the echo of something breaking apart. He stood at the podium, staring at the silver-wrapped box in his hands. His eyes caught the note on top, "From the daughter you once called your biggest failure." His face hardened, jaw tightening. Drew stepped toward him, whispering, "We should continue the program?" But Gregory shook his head, a slow, almost involuntary motion. With deliberate slowness, as if every gesture carried weight, he untied the navy ribbon and carefully peeled back the silver paper. No one in the room moved. Every rustle, every breath seemed amplified. Inside was a plain white box. He lifted the lid. The first thing he saw was Evelyn's MIT diploma, her name printed boldly beside the words, Summa Cum Laude. Several guests seated nearby leaned forward, murmuring softly. Next came her architecture license neatly framed. Then the Hammond Award medal catching the stage lights as Gregory lifted it with tentative fingers, studying its gleam, as if for the first time truly recognizing its meaning. A USB drive followed labeled, What It Takes. And then the item that stopped him cold, a yellowed envelope addressed in his late wife Diane's handwriting. For a moment, Gregory's composure slipped. His face paled. He blinked rapidly. He didn't open the letter. Not yet. Just placed it down gently, hand trembling. One by one, he unpacked the rest: newspaper articles, award photos, high-profile designs, income statements showing his daughter's multi-million-dollar career, quietly built, consistently overlooked. At the bottom of the box, a single card. Gregory read it silently, lips pressing into a thin line. You build with steel and concrete. I build with vision and heart. Both require what it takes. I learned that from being your daughter, even when you couldn't see my worth. Goodbye, Dad. He swallowed hard. For perhaps the first time in his life, Gregory Bennett stood on a stage with nothing to say. The microphone stayed on, broadcasting his ragged breath across a stunned crowd. After a long pause, he finally managed, I believe, that concludes the formal portion of the evening. His voice was hoarse, broken. Drew rushed to the stage, trying to smooth things over. Thank you for joining the Bennett family tonight, he announced, smiling too hard. The dessert bar and live music continue outside. Chairs shuffled. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. But at the head table, Gregory remained seated, silent still, his attention fixed on the box before him. Eventually, he opened Diane's letter. His eyes scanned the pages slowly. When he reached the final line, his grip tightened. Evelyn is the best gift we ever had. Don't let your pride make you miss her. And in that moment, Gregory was no longer the celebrated CEO. No longer the powerful patriarch. Just a man finally facing everything he had been too blind to see. For a week after the gala, Evelyn threw herself into work. The Riverside redevelopment project was entering its final design phase, and she spent long hours at Harper & Langley coordinating teams, refining models, and double-checking structural specs. She said nothing about what had happened that night, not to Caleb, not to colleagues, and certainly not to anyone in her family. But the messages kept coming. Quiet reminders that the past wasn't done with her. Text 1, from Drew. Are you okay? Text 2, from Brian, Dad's like a ghost. You showed him something we never could. Text 3, from Gregory Bennett's number 6 missed calls, followed by a single line. I watched everything. I was wrong. When you're ready, I'd like to talk. Evelyn didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because she wasn't sure what would happen if she opened that door. And she wasn't ready for what might come through it. Lauren, her college best friend, was the first to break the silence. Over lunch at their usual spot, she gently placed a hand over Evelyn's. Are you really not going to talk to him? You don't have to forgive anything, just listen. Evelyn sighed. I'm afraid if I hear his voice, I'll fall right back into the loop, hoping he sees me. Then being let down again? Lauren nodded. That's fair. But you'll have to decide eventually whether there's something left to salvage or if it's time to close that chapter for good. That conversation lingered in Evelyn's mind all the way back to the office. Later that afternoon, Drew showed up at her office door unannounced, without his usual polished demeanor. His shirt was wrinkled hair, slightly mussed. Can I come in? She nodded. It's been a while. Yeah. There's something I need to tell you. He sat across from her, fingers laced tightly. Dad hasn't left the house since the gala. Canceled his golf trip. Won't take board calls. She said nothing, eyes still on her laptop screen. He watched your video, Drew continued. What it takes. Not once. over and over. She froze. He called us over the next day, made us watch it with him, and I didn't know what to say. You've done so much, Evelyn. And I never asked. I just assumed you were fine, because you always were. You didn't need to ask, she said quietly. But, yeah. I hoped someone would. He emailed you, didn't he? She nodded. He doesn't know if you read it. But he said, if you didn't respond, he'd understand. He just wants a chance to make things right, even once. That night she opened the email again. Subject line, I'm sorry. Message, I saw everything on the USB. I was wrong. When you're ready, I'd like to listen. No excuses, no defenses, just honesty. For the first time, Evelyn felt something shift. She didn't write back. Instead, a few days later, she booked a flight to Singapore. A green hotel developer there had requested a consultation perfect excuse to be 8,000 miles away from Boston from her father, from any conversation she wasn't ready for. But even oceans away, Evelyn knew silence never lasts forever. Some truths don't disappear. If you don't face them, they'll follow you quietly, persistently, even when you think you've moved on. 3 days into her stay in Singapore, Evelyn hadn't opened a single email outside of work. Her days were filled with site visits, strategy meetings with a green hotel developer, and pages of design notes scribbled into her technical notebook. Not a word about Boston. Not a single returned call. But on her third night as she returned to her hotel suite, her phone buzzed. Text from Brian: Dad just held a surprise meeting with the board. Topic: launching a green architecture division. He brought up your name. The phone rang a few seconds later. It was Brian. Did you see the alert? He asked, almost breathless. He brought out the USB, the one from your box, played What It Takes for the entire executive team, said the company had fallen behind on sustainability and that you were the wake-up call. Evelyn leaned back into her chair. A part of her had flown across the world to escape it all, but it seemed her absence had only amplified what she left behind. Later that night, she received another email, this time from her father's personal account. Subject: Community Project. From Dad Body. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what you gave me, about what I never saw. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I would like to offer something. I'm planning to build a community center in Shelby, where your mother grew up. I don't have the knowledge to design it right, but I want you to be the first to look at the concept. I want your feedback not as my daughter, but as an architect. Attached are the drawings and a letter. If you find it worth your time, let me know. If not, I'll understand. Gregory. She opened the attachment. A rough hand-drawn sketch filled the screen. Scribbled in pencil were notes in her father's familiar handwriting. The site was marked in Shelby, Vermont, her mother's hometown, the place where she once dreamed of building a community library after retirement. Something stirred quietly inside Evelyn. Next to the drawings was a scanned letter in longhand. She enlarged the first few lines. Evelyn, these past few weeks have been difficult but necessary. The box you gave me, your mother would have called it a reckoning. It forced me to realize that for years I've been living under the shadow of my own blind spots. And because of that, I never truly saw you, the person who has far exceeded every limit I once imagined. The final lines held her gaze the longest. If you're willing to review this or even lead the project, I'll know there's still hope. Not for the company, but for something far more important, our family. Evelyn sat motionless. Night air drifted in from the balcony, carrying the low hum of the city below. She didn't know if she was ready to forgive. But this invitation, unlike the commands of the past, was something new. It wasn't guilt-wrapped manipulation. It was a genuine offer. For the first time, Gregory Bennett wasn't looking at her as his daughter. He was seeing her as a professional, a partner, someone worth inviting to the table. At precisely 10:00 a.m. on Wednesday, Evelyn sat alone at a window table at Harborview Cafe, overlooking the calm surface of Lake Michigan. She often used the cafe for client meetings, neutral, quiet, and free from family history. 2 coffees sat on the table, 1 cappuccino, 1 black. Gregory Bennett arrived right on time. He wore his usual gray suit, but something in his posture had changed. His pace was slower, his shoulders slightly slumped, and in his eyes was something Evelyn had never seen before: hesitation. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, standing awkwardly at the table holding his hat. "Please sit," Evelyn replied, gesturing to the chair opposite her. Once the server left, silence stretched between them. But it wasn't the cold, heavy silence of their past dinners. This time, it was cautious, tentative, shared. "I received your drawings," Evelyn began. "There's potential, but a lot needs rethinking." Gregory's expression softened, not because she approved, but because she hadn't outright rejected it. "I know," he nodded. "I've been reading books on community design, but books can't teach vision." "Why, Shelby?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Because of your mother," he said. "She always wanted to give back to that town, start a scholarship fund, build a library, a safe space for kids. I promised I'd help her. Then life got in the way." For the first time in years, they sat in silence that wasn't hostile but reflective. They both knew that Diane had once been the only bridge between them. Now she lived on in memory alone. "How many times have you watched the video?" Evelyn asked, eyes still on the lake. "Almost 20, he admitted, not smiling. "I couldn't believe what you've built." "And more than that?" "I couldn't believe how little I knew about it." Evelyn said nothing. She had once longed to hear words like that. Now they didn't feel triumphant, just freeing. "I used to want your approval," she said softly. "But in the end I kept going, not for you. For Mom. For me." "I know," Gregory replied. "And your mother once told me something, that if I kept treating you like the fragile one, I'd teach you to doubt yourself." Evelyn turned to look at him. When did she say that? "A month before her diagnosis," he answered. "I ignored it then. I can't anymore." The atmosphere shifted. Not reconciliation yet, but space. A space where honesty could start to grow. About the project, Gregory said carefully, "I want you to lead it. No strings, no oversight. It's your call. I'll support it like I should have from the beginning." Evelyn studied him, then nodded. "I'll consider it. Professionally." Gregory exhaled, not relief, but as if stepping through a long closed door. As they stood to leave, he asked, "If you agree, can we go over timelines and budget next time?" "Maybe," she replied, "one step at a time." For the first time, Gregory Bennett wasn't looking at Evelyn as someone to correct. He was looking at her as a person equal, capable, and finally worth listening to. 3 weeks after their meeting at Harborview Cafe, Evelyn arrived in Shelby, Vermont. The small town unfolded through the car window like a peaceful painting, rows of red maple trees lining the street's old wooden porches, and a quiet charm that belonged to another era. Gregory Bennett was already waiting by the empty lot where the community center would rise. This time he came alone, no assistants, no flashy presentations. Just a revised sketch and a quiet humility she had never seen before. "We'll start here," Evelyn said, unrolling updated blueprints onto the hood of his pickup truck. Beside her stood 2 young associates from Harper & Langley, experts in sustainable development. "Your original concept had heart," she continued. "But I've added a few elements: an open-air reading garden, a sunlit playground, and a community vegetable plot for senior residents." Gregory nodded silently. He didn't defend his initial draft or try to redirect the conversation. He let Evelyn lead, a rare move for a man who built his career giving orders. The following days were filled with meetings at Shelby Town Hall. Evelyn presented before the city planning board, detailing eco-efficient designs and cost-reducing innovations. Gregory sat quietly in the back, watching, not interrupting, not correcting, just listening. At their fourth session, when preliminary approval was granted, one council member asked, "Is this truly a joint project or just an attempt to make up for past mistakes?" Evelyn responded without hesitation, "We began with broken pieces, but today this is a true collaboration, 2 generations rebuilding something that matters." After the session, Gregory approached her quietly. "You didn't have to defend me in there." Evelyn glanced at him and offered a faint smile. "I wasn't defending you. I was speaking for the project. This town deserves unity, not more division." Weeks later, when the project officially broke ground, Gregory willingly stepped back into an advisory role. Every technical, financial, and architectural decision passed through Evelyn and her team. For the first time, there was no power struggle, just partnership. One afternoon, as they stood at the site's edge, watching bulldozers begin to shape the foundation, Gregory murmured, "I never thought you'd give me this chance." Evelyn didn't look at him, just replied, "I didn't give you a chance because you're my father. I did it because you changed, and because for the first time you actually listened." Gregory was silent for a long while. Maybe he finally said, "When we realize we're wrong, we don't need forgiveness right away. Sometimes, all we need is a chance to make it right." Evelyn nodded. To her, this collaboration wasn't just about building a structure, it was about rebuilding trust. Not a picture-perfect father-daughter bond, but 2 people once broken learning to understand each other again. Not with promises, but with action. On the digital front page of Modern Civic Design, Evelyn Bennett's portrait appeared with the bold headline, "The Architect of Healing, Redefining Community Brick by Brick." To Evelyn, the headline wasn't a trophy. It was a quiet milestone, one that marked a journey few believed she could walk. Once she had been the disappointment daughter, the one who defied her father's path, excluded from family board dinners, treated like an outsider in the achievement-saturated Bennett lineage. But now, standing on the construction grounds in Shelby, surrounded by hammer strikes and the churn of cement mixers, Evelyn was no longer someone trying to prove herself. She was the decision-maker, the voice people turned to. Even Gregory Bennett, the man who once dismissed her, would now ask, "What's our next step?" No one saw her transformation more clearly than Lauren, her closest friend and longtime collaborator at Harper & Langley. In an internal team interview, Lauren once said, "Evelyn doesn't conquer with speeches. She leads through precision, kindness, and vision. She doesn't tear down the system, she rebuilds it one brick at a time." Her evolution didn't come from a dramatic turning point. It came from consistent quiet days, listening to Shelby's residents, refining every design detail, ensuring the structure harmonized with its environment and community soul. As the project neared completion, Evelyn hosted an open gathering for the townspeople. They didn't just come to check progress, they came to share, to ask, to belong. One elderly woman grasped Evelyn's hand and said, "You're the reason I believe the younger generation hasn't forgotten us." That afternoon, Gregory stood at a distance watching his daughter among the crowd. He didn't step in. He simply observed. His eyes settled on one small detail, the beige coat Evelyn wore. It was Diane's old favorite. In that moment, Gregory realized Diane never truly left. She lived on in Evelyn through her empathy, her leadership, and her unwavering protection of what mattered. A few days later, during an interview, Gregory was asked, "What does it feel like to have your daughter leading the most meaningful project of your legacy?" He paused, then replied, "I used to think Evelyn had lost her way. Now I see she didn't lose it. She just took a path I never had the courage to walk." The opening day of the Shelby Community Center arrived without fanfare, no flashy banners, no high-ranking officials. But every resident who came brought quiet pride with them. The fall breeze drifted gently across the wooden benches where children swung their legs waiting for the first speaker. Evelyn Bennett stood before the building she and her team had spent over a year designing and constructing. Behind her, etched into the glass wall of the main hall, were simple words that made the entire square fall silent for a moment. Dedicated to Diane Bennett, who believed in what didn't exist yet and planted the seeds for what would. Gregory Bennett stood still. In his career, he had cut the ribbon on dozens of buildings, but none had ever felt like home. This time, he didn't give a speech. He stood behind the front row, holding his late wife's old hat, watching the daughter he had finally learned to trust by stepping aside. The ceremony ended not with applause, but with quiet warmth. A child handed Evelyn a small bouquet of wildflowers. The same elderly woman who once grasped her hand returned for a longer squeeze. No major publication covered the event. Yet for Evelyn, it was one of the most complete days of her life. A few days later, while organizing storage at Harper and Langley, Lauren stumbled upon an old wooden box Evelyn had always kept tucked away. Inside were her early sketches, letters from her mother, and the first newspaper article to ever mention her name. Lauren asked, "You've made it. You're recognized. Your father now supports you. Why still keep this box?" Evelyn smiled. Because legacy isn't about what people leave behind. It's about what reminds us where we started. That evening in the quiet of her office, Evelyn opened the box again and pulled out a faded photo. It showed 3 people, Diane Gregory and 12-year-old Evelyn, standing in front of the first house they ever built together in the countryside. A time when the family was whole and trust had yet to be tested. Now, after everything Evelyn no longer needed to hear, "I'm proud of you," from her father. He had shown it in the one way that truly mattered, by stepping back, listening, and letting her lead. To Evelyn, legacy wasn't made of bricks and mortar. It was transformation. It was a father learning to love differently. It was a daughter who had once been dismissed, now shaping something greater than herself. And so the story closed not with revenge, not with proving anyone wrong, but with a building. A memory rebuilt through trust. A living legacy because it wasn't just recorded. It was carried on.